Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, today we have a video in English, but for my German audience, don't be afraid. This is just one video in English because I have a guest from the other side of the world, so we have to do it in English. But with the next video, saying that I will continue in German. So I have a guest here from Hawaii. His name is Janos. Aloha, Janos.
Guten Abend, Torsten. It's an honor to be here, and I have a very little known YouTube channel. It's called Real World Audio, and on this channel, I talk about audio for audiophiles and all its aspects, including music, including how you create system synergy, how do you choose equipment, how do you modify equipment, how do you build your own equipment. So I have advice from the most beginner, most entry level to the most esoteric level.
And your channel is really different from what we are used to because you are not doing any kind of reviews. You are not testing gear that you can buy in the shop. That's really special. You really dive into the deeps of yeah, esoteric audio. You're really trying to explain how things work and giving advice on how to build stuff and so on. So it's really a different channel. There's no second channel like yours.
Uh, that's because of a very special start I had in audio. And with that start, I have heard right at the beginning of my audio journey when I was first exposed to audiophile equipment, a few systems that just sounded absolutely phenomenal. But the price range you could buy them was absolutely astronomical. And I did quick calculations and realized that that sort of system, if I want to purchase it, is not a valid option and not an easy path. Yet I was really captivated by how much we can get from the sound, how deeply we can connect to music when we have an audio system that's optimized and be able to bring that out. And right away, my idea when I first heard such a high level system was not that, oh my god, how much money, I could buy a Rolls Royce instead. My idea was that I am going to build this for myself, and I'm going to find a mentor, I'm going to learn, I'm going to study and able to reproduce it. And as it happened, it all came true. And now I am at a stage where I want to share my journey. I want to share it, how I did it, how what are the pointers I can give to everyone, how you can find it and turn it into a reality.
I remember one of your videos where you spoke about your beginnings, and told a story about a speaker that you were absolutely fascinated by a certain speaker commercially available product. And I'm not mentioning the brand here, but yeah. Um, and you were fascinated by a high-end speaker, and then you had a chance to listen to it, and you were super disappointed. And it was really like a very, very expensive, super high-end, super duper loudspeaker, and you were sitting in front of it and thinking like, yeah, but that is not transporting the music, the musicality, the feeling. It is an how you call it, like an informative speaker, but it's not an emotional speaker. Was that the moment where you knew, okay, I have to build it myself, or was it just because it is cheaper to build itself?
Actually, it was after that moment, because when I heard that system, that was so disappointing, which was the most expensive loudspeaker of that age. And literally 10 minutes later, I heard another loudspeaker, another system, which was also the second most expensive system in the show. And that was by far the best sound. It almost reminded me as if it was at a level that comes from another planet, another civilization. And I realized that there's a big disconnect here, because the price alone does not give the is not a guarantee to for a musical absorption, for that quality of an experience that a musician or someone would expect who grew up with musicians in the family. Um,
Yeah. I have exactly the same feeling that there are, especially at these exhibitions, you see like ridiculously expensive stereo sets, and for the most part, they do not even sound great. I mean, it's like at least you would expect some spectacle, some yeah, I don't know, something amazing, even if you don't like it, but you expect something really great, something really big. And in many cases, yeah, it's just expensive, but it's pretty much disappointing. And I have the feeling there are a few very expensive, awesome systems, but this is not what you see at the exhibitions. This is not what you see at the dealers. I have the feeling that the dealers mostly sell stuff which is easy to sell, which is like nice from a design perspective. It fits nicely into your living room and that kind of stuff. But they barely care about the sound reproduction quality.
I so agree with that, and that's what I have seen too. That most equipment are not okay. Let me just go one step back. So what I see is there's the problem is with commercialization and how we are supposed to put our systems together, because the entire audio industry has developed in a direction that you can mix and match components. So that's why we have set uh, parts of a stereo system, such as loudspeakers, loudspeaker cables, power amplifier, preamplifier, a DAC, a transport. All of these discrete components have developed to allow mixing and matching between different brands. But this is not the optimal way to create a system, and there's no guarantees that it will work in your room. The listening preferences have to be taken account. Do you listen quietly? Do you listen loud? What is the complexity of the music that one plays? Because each aspect, when we are talking about not going crazy about building a system just at an affordable level, every approach requires a very different system, and it needs to be taken as a system and not as separate components. And when I see these very expensive components at audio shows, what I get from my knowledge and from my experience is that there is an extreme lack of system synergy when they are presented. Because when we look at an extremely priced loudspeaker, even if it's, let's say, twice or three times overpriced because of design considerations went into how it should look, and the money was not spent on how it should sound, but it still should sound at least as good as a product a third of its price, if we are not looking at the looks of the components. Yet, when we listen to it at the show, it doesn't even sound that good. And that's not because of incompetent designers. If a designer is incompetent, then they won't even be able to market the product. They need to have a level of competency to get there, and the problem appears because there's a general lack of awareness, and that's what I want to turn around, to improve that awareness, how systems should be put together, what it is that we really need to look for to satisfy our needs.
All right. Lack of awareness. I mean, yeah. Well, people have different tastes, and I mean, you, for example, you are I would call you a tube guy. You like tube amplifiers and really low wattage amplifiers and that kind of thing. But there are also people who like transistor amplifiers, like the big huge ones. I'm not a fan of these type of amps either, but I know there are people who like this kind of stuff. So are they simply wrong, or you know what I'm saying?
Yes,
I
yes.
mean,
I think
we have a
it's
different
a lot
taste, but
about tastes, and I really love the fact that we have such a wide selection, and such different approaches are available for us to pursue, and in some cases, like a high wattage system can work better for a person than a low wattage with high efficiency, high sensitivity loudspeakers. And what where I see the advantage of a very high wattage system with very low efficiency loudspeaker is that I find that they are much less reactive to the quality of the line AC, of the electricity that's in our wall. So if one lives in an area where there's too much pollution, too much noise being injected into the power lines. There's like maybe you have a cell phone tower nearby, and it's a really bad situation. And what happens is if you have an extremely reactive system that just amplifies the music, which means distorts the music the least amount from the source that's read out from the media, then that system, this low wattage system, because we amplify the signal only to a few milliwatts for an average listening level, and when I reach 1 watt, it's already concert level. So basically, in my average listening, I'm listening to 50 to 200 milliwatts. And 200 milliwatts is already a loud bit for me in my room. But when you have such a system, then this is extremely sensitive to the electricity I get from the wall, to how the neighbors, are they at home, are they cooking, is my AC on or not. And when someone has a high power system, then the strength of this system is to generate a lot of power, generate uh, basically become a little bit more immune to the low level changes in the electrical supply, the low level signals in the recordings, and they are great in power delivery. But on the other, and that's why there's a lot of people who love high power amplification. But on the other hand, these systems are, in my experience, entirely incapable of reproducing low level details in the sound. They are
yes.
incapable of reproducing dynamics. Yes, they can play loud, they have energy, they have a lot of punch and power, but they cannot play loud and very soft at the same time. So if we listen to an orchestral recording, they have no problems delivering the timpani and the forte and the tutti, but when there is that single violin barely singing, we are going to miss the entirety of that.
Yeah. Well, I would like to come back to the awareness, because um, So I completely understand and accept that there are people who like exactly this type of sound. It's not my sound, but I understand that there are people who like it. The bad thing is that we only have this one type of system. You know, we have these like 85 to 90 dB speakers, and then we have these 200 watts amplifiers, and but that is the only kind of stereos that you see in the shops. And you can absolutely rarely, or basically almost never, find a speaker with like 100 dB efficiency or above, and you rarely find like amplifiers with like 10 watts or less. You always see this one direction. This is what basically everybody sells. Yeah, in different quality levels, of course, and there is nothing else. And
Yes,
I have the feeling if you want such a system, then you have to build it yourself. There is no way that you can buy it because there are simply no dealers who sell this kind of stuff.
that's entirely true. That's the blessing and the curse of having, I would say, affordable high power amplifiers and affordable low efficiency speakers, even though they still seem very expensive and they still sell for quite a lot of money. But at least we have a price range that goes from cheaper to more expensive. But you are absolutely right. When we go for uh, these types of equipment that I'm playing around with, you aren't even able to audition them, to listen to them. And for me, the first time I was exposed to it was when my mentor had an audio club meeting, and he encouraged everyone to bring their home project into the store, and people brought in their uh, 3 watt, 2 watt, 1 watt, or not even 1 watt, like 2/3 of a watt amplifiers, and we plugged them into Stu's main system, a big high-end system that has the big Conrad Johnson uh, amplifier, transistor amplifier in it, high power amplifier, driving these lowish efficiency, very high-end loudspeakers with the top front end. And everyone was just completely amazed and floored that those home built projects, some of which were just in the few $100 range, they did something that very high end product could not perform. So the level of intimacy, they could reach to that level or even surpass that level. Of course, they could not play extremely loud with those inefficient speakers, but they played loud enough, and this gave me the idea that, hey, I asked Kyle. He was one of my audio buddies and audio mentors. He still is. And I told him, Kyle, could you bring your darling amplifier over to my place, because I have these void pipes I built, which are 95 dB efficient. So let's hear what this ultra low power amplifier can do with an efficient speaker. And there were five of us there when he did that. One was Kyle and me and three more. And out of those four people who heard that ultra low power amplifier play with that high efficiency speaker, three of us decided to build it, to clone it. And
Yeah.
out of the three of us, one had absolutely zero experience with DIYing. He never did anything. He never even soldered before, didn't know how to read schematics, had no basics. The second, he was Charlie, my cable buddy. We built interconnect cables together, but that's how far he ventured. He also had zero skills. And myself at the time, I already had experience with modifying equipment, but going so far as building an amplifier from scratch, that was a long shot for me too. But this experience was enough that all three of us immediately, right away, decided we have to build this. This is just something amazing that you can't hear, can't find anywhere else for any
And
money.
you are still using this Starling amplifier till today, right?
Yes, yes. Eventually, as life happened, I have all of these three amplifiers that we built on that day. All three came to me. Charlie gave me his amplifier eventually after he got his Yamamoto 45 amp. And then he started playing around with that mostly. So that took the number one place in his system. But it took the Yamamoto to replace the Darling. It was so good. And the second Darling, the owner, Tomasz, he moved away from the island, so he gave me his amps. So today I have one Darling in stock condition, one Darling a little bit modified. That's in my upstairs room, and I really tweaked it out to an extreme level. But that's also close to the original Darling topology, but it has little bit more output power. It has about 3 watts of output, but
Wow, it's almost PA.
yeah, it's almost too much, one would think. And the main Darling amplifier that I have downstairs in my main room, for that one I decreased the power from the initial 1.5 watts down to 1.2 watts, so it's delivering 1.2 watts into my main loudspeakers.
You spoke about the intimacy that you get from these really small hi-fi components, and I must admit one of my absolutely favorite speakers of all time is the L'audiophile Le Petit. It's a full range speaker, a 10 centimeter full range speaker, and it was designed as a entry L'audiophile product from La Maison de l'Audiophile in Paris. And I mean, this thing is so far away from hi-fi. It has nothing to do with hi-fi. It basically does a very tight, not very low playing bass. Of course, it's not really extremely resolving in the high frequencies. Of course, because it is a full range driver. But I still think in terms of intimacy, in terms of connection to music, it's one of the best products ever built. And then I think that that is following a similar path like yours. Like build it really simple, build it really to the basics, to the bare minimum that you need to reproduce music, and you get something out of it that is really special and really different from what you experience in a shop.
But that's something quite fascinating, and I think this extreme simplicity, that form of simplicity, that to make something as simple as possible, but not any simpler. This allows a very different kind of experiencing music and your and our recordings, and that's because. When we look at the typical high-end products that we can see in the stores here, there, they follow the path of complexity. So what
Yeah.
they are trying is to uh, employ additional and additional features to overcome difficulties. And they are really wonderful and excellent at that. So, for example, they can overcome frequency limitations by employing more woofers, more tweeters, super tweeter, subwoofer, like making it very complex. So we cover a wider range of the audible frequencies. However, by introducing a number of crossovers between these drivers, we are breaking up the sonic coherency. And there are people who are saying, okay, then let's just use DSP. But DSP is not something intelligent. It is basically the computerized version of a graphic analyzer, of a 30 channel graphic analyzer. And
Oh, you are triggering so many of my audience now, because I have a lot of people who love DSP. But yeah, I agree with you. This
uh,
is basically what I think about these products as well. Yeah,
so I think for these listeners, I have the great news to share that I think DSP is a really powerful tool, and in a way, it has even more to offer than the traditional graphic equalizers, and we can debate whether it's better or not, because to be frank, I don't recall hearing or seeing any review directly comparing a traditional 30 channel graphic equalizer to a DSP. So I would be really curious how that would work out today. But going back to the function and purpose of that is that it gives us a very powerful and very quick way to adapt a system that doesn't have any synergy to how to bring out the most out of it. So basically, it's like having an athlete who has broken ribs, concussion, and a few broken toes, and putting that person on multiple casts, giving him therapy. That's what DSP does. And then you have a happy person who can walk again. But what people forget that an athlete in a cast, even though he can walk about and buy the sausages from the store and buy his beer, but he won't be able to run and perform and enjoy life as well as a healthy athlete. And when
yeah,
you have these simple approaches, how to create simplicity, that's when you have a healthy athlete who doesn't have any props, but at the same time, as these props work out in real life, they are not just a cost that limit the athlete. They are also like a mechanized robot parts that allow the gear to do things that it normally would not be able to do with the restraints of technology that it has. So to make it less cryptic, when we are looking at loudspeakers, loudspeakers require tremendous size to be able to reproduce low frequency sound,
exactly. Yeah,
and the simple reason of that,
and you can't trick physics.
we can
It's
trick
simply
physics.
not.
We have
Yeah,
invented miniaturized transistors, miniaturized cell phones, but no one has invented a miniaturized 16-meter long 20 hertz sound wave.
yeah,
That's not possible. The technology advances, but the sound waves, the physics, that remains unchanged. And we are using the same technology, a cone or a membrane or any surface moving forwards, moving backwards, trying to excite pressure fluctuations in the air, trying the air to create those waves, those pressure waves that will translate into sound in the brain. And the only way to create these very low frequency sound waves is by using high volume large cabinets. And when we want to miniaturize the experience, uh, then we have multiple problems that people are not aware of. One of it is dynamic compression. So we are compressing the dynamic capabilities. And I had long discussions with my subscribers, and some of them are extremely knowledgeable in many fields related to audio, or are professionals working there. And some say that there's no uh, reason in physics that would limit the dynamic range for a lower efficiency loudspeaker. And for the physics part, when we look at the sensitivity itself, that might be true, because you can compensate lack of sensitivity by throwing 10 times or 100 or 1,000 times more watts at the problem.
Exactly,
But the
exactly.
problem
Very,
is,
very important point. Yes.
but the problem is that if I throw 100 times more watts, then I have to alter the source signal 100 times more compared to amplifying it only to a single watt. And then
Yeah.
that's a law of physics that if I'm changing the energy state of an information, of a signal, I am going to add distortions, alterations to it. And
Yeah.
then there's the complex system building school that is predominant today, and it says, aha, we can employ error correction. We can employ the negative feedback loops, which is the typical error correction done at the amplifier level. We can employ DSP, that's employed at the loudspeaker level, and we can correct all of those problems. However, the point that everyone
But
seems to
it is all
neglect.
adding up and driving you away from the music.
Yes, it,
It
it
gets
does. It
less and
does
less
because
intimate and so on. The soul of the music is disappearing the more of these tricks you're using.
and the soul is disappearing because we are changing the signal. These error correction mechanisms are not intelligent. They are not infinitely selective. They cannot differentiate the music signal from the error introduced by the individual components in the amplifier. So they're grinding it up. It's kind of like making a hamburger from your steak. And that's one advantage of it, is that everything is ground to a common ground, so there's not as much fluctuation, there's not as much differences. If you put on a recording, you get similar sonic signature every time you listen to something, and we have these preconceptions that a certain amplifier or loudspeaker or system, this has great bass, and that's because that system has adds that error, adds that distortion to the sound, so it distorts everything to have more bass, because there are recordings with a lot of bass, there are recordings where there's hardly any bass, and if your system presents everything with a lot of bass, then something is getting lost in the translation.
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, if you, I would like to go back to this downsizing of speakers. In my opinion, when you miniaturize a speaker, you are also miniaturizing the whole soundstage. That is my experience. I mean,
That's
if you have,
absolutely, yeah, I that's
yeah,
absolutely my experience too, is
yeah,
that even if we throw more watts at it, all it will make,
it's not changing anything. It's
it's
not,
not
yeah,
changing it. It's just making louder and louder. So, for example, I did a few experiments, put bookshelf speakers down here in my main listening room, and had small first standards, big first standards, and my giant Altex. And I was listening to music through all of them, like changing the speakers, going bigger and bigger, and the sound just scaled up, opened up as I went bigger and bigger. And if I just adjusted the volume to play louder, then the small speaker was just louder, but the scale didn't increase. I still had those miniature Muppet Show, those puppets in
yeah.
between the speakers, just shouting instead of whispering.
It is exactly the same analogy that I'm using. I always compare it to Muppet Show and
It's
or
so
Sesame
wonderful.
Street. That is exactly my comparison as well. Yeah,
And with these tiny speakers, the smaller the speaker size, the more we are limited to a single volume where we can listen to them. Because if we go louder than the optimal volume, it's already too loud and it's fatiguing. And even if when we start to go lower in volume, then it's not as engaging anymore, and it just collapses, and it starts, I mean, stops being an experience you want to live. So there's the audio channel of Steve Gutenberg, the audiophiliac, and
yeah,
he has pointed out in several videos of him that he is just so particular about the volume setting in his system. there's only a single click of volume where it sounds right. If you go one click below or one click higher, it's either not engaging or it's fatiguing. And that's because when we are using systems that on the loudspeaker side do not have that vast dynamic range, cannot play with cannot transmit energy to the bass in a natural format, when we have amplifiers that are incapable of providing low level signals, then we are stuck at a single level of listening.
Yeah.
And
There's
sometimes,
even
sorry, Torsten, I would like to add one more thing to it, because
yeah, of course.
when you look at Steve Gutenberg, he has clip horns as well, that he is listening to some quite sensitive speakers, but he is still stuck with the single volume. So many of our listeners are now asking, okay, so this doesn't match, right? So he still has those high efficiency speakers, but why is he stuck with a single volume? And that's because the amplifier also needs to be able to cover the dynamic range of the loudspeaker. It needs to be able to play the entire dynamic range with the same uh, detail resolution, the same energy level, the same distortion spectrum. So the softest whispers, the character of them needs to be identical to the character of the loudest loud. And that's when we are able to enjoy the sound at any volume.
Yes. Also have these misconception a lot from my audience, that they think, okay, I have a small room, so I can't use a big speaker because that will overpower my room. Or I hear this misconception, yeah, I like to hear very silently. I hear at nights, and I don't want to make my neighbors freak out. So I want to listen in very low volumes, so I can't use a big speaker, and that is a perfect misconception. It's exactly the other way around. A bigger speaker naturally, with like bigger chassis, with like bigger drivers, naturally works better in a small room, and a big speaker works better with low volumes. But that is something that people, yeah, they always connect, like a small speaker means small volume, and that is not true at all.
Yes, that is so true. And of course people have this misconception because that's intuitive of many other fields or other experiences you have, right? If it's smaller, then it delivers smaller, and if it's big, it has to play loud, because when you go to a concert, they have really loud speakers. But what people don't know is that when you have a bigger loudspeaker, then it means that the cone has to move very little to reproduce sound, and it can transmit the energy of the music, energy coming from the amplifier to the air, in a much more efficient manner. And that means it's losing much less information, much less energy in the process. So when we have a tiny loudspeaker, 99% or more of the energy we feed it, it's translated to heat, it's wasted. So we are basically, it's like a garbage disposal, and the music is just the byproduct of a tiny speaker. And uh, and they need to be made in a way to to resist its ability to. Oh, wow. Now I'm getting combobulated in my explanations, and because I'm saying something, but I'm trying to figure out how to shrink a gigantic subject, and that
Yeah,
involves
into a
like
few, yeah, how to
20,
simplify it
20,
that people can
20,
still get it. Yeah.
20 big areas, and then shrink it into a sentence. And I just figured out mid-sentence that I'm unable to do that because the subject is so complex. So uh, I would just then like to also share my thoughts that the more efficient a loudspeaker is, it also means the bigger its size is. It can play quieter because it covers a wider dynamic range, and it can excite those low frequencies even when we push very little energy, very little SPL to it. So this was that particular thing that I noticed with my Altex, is that I can turn the volume down to whisper soft. But if I'm listening to a full scale orchestra, let's say Beethoven's symphonies, it is still huge. I am hearing a full
Yeah,
orchestra. It still has the weight of the orchestra. It
yeah.
doesn't collapse, doesn't disappear. It's so quiet. I can play it downstairs while Nelly is still sleeping upstairs, and I can enjoy a Beethoven symphony with someone sleeping next door. And if I would try to do that with bookshelf speakers,
You would
turn
only hear the tweeter.
I would only hear the tweeter and nothing else. The bass would be completely long gone by that level. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
able to hear anything below 200 hertz. And with a very high efficiency system, I hear the scale, I hear the weight, I'm still experiencing it, which and to get the scale and the weight, it means that we are going to very low frequency territory, because that gives us the impression. That's how the brain translates that you are sitting in a concert hall, that there are very low frequency sound waves present in that gigantic acoustic space.
Let's talk about a bit about your drivers, because you already mentioned it. You're using an 15-inch Altec lensing driver. What is it, an 808 or 816 or
I'm
something?
using the 515C. So
550.
this
Okay.
most people, when they play around with these Altec drivers, they use the 400 series, and they use the 900 series compression drivers with it, and so that's what you see as being the most popular amongst these very obscure audiophiles who build their own system and they play around with things. I'm playing around with the 515 series, which was the driver in the main line of the voice of the theater speakers.
Yes. Yeah.
But when you dig into the subject more, then the 400 series was also used in these, but in the small models. In
Yeah.
those models that were not in the big theater rooms, but they were more geared towards like smaller.
Even in the studio monitors.
Yes, the studio monitors, that sort of situation. So the 515 series, that was reserved for the theaters, and the main design purpose for these drivers was human voice. So when James B.
Yes.
Lansing designed these drivers, the main criteria, main consideration was to give the most intimate, the most palpable, relatable human voice to the audiences who were going to the theaters. Because at the early time of the movie industry, when we started films coming out, then that was the attitude. That was what people expected. They expected to relate to the humans at the human level, at the emotional level, unlike what we have today in the movie industry, when we want to see special effects, we want to hear the submarine crash to the iceberg,
Yeah.
we want to hear special effects, we want to hear explosions, machine guns. We don't have a single movie today where there's not at least hundreds of kilograms of ammunition being spent. and and today the equipment that we use for stereos, I mean at the movie theaters, and home stereos and home audio, which aim at recreating an experience, a feel that is vibing with this type of mentality, that requires a very different mindset than those drivers which were created with the intent to connect you with a human being.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't it super sad? I mean, that you are using Altec drivers, and these drivers are basically how old are they? They are from the 50s, I think. So
Yes, they
it's
are really, really old. So my what I'm using, the 515 series, is basically dates back to the late 30s.
late 30s. Oh my
and
goodness,
and and and
almost
it was
100
it
years old. I mean, that's
yes, it's
ridiculous.
crazy, and it was in production. So it started with series A, and then B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on. My series is the C series, so it's a relatively early series as well, and they were in constant production, I would say, until the 80s. But even now, Great Plains Audio has purchased the original factory, and they are still making these drivers there, their present day interpretation of them,
But
but with,
for crazy prices
yes, for
still.
crazy prices.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, but I think it is so ridiculous that I mean you are not the only one who prefers the old original Altec drivers. That I mean these drivers that you're using, they are basically the holy grail of DIY systems. And I mean we are talking about drivers that are like 70 to 100 years old. And while the industry is telling us everything is better and better every year, yeah, but people who build their own stuff uh, using 100-year-old gears. So what has become better? I don't see it. You know, so that is a problem I really have.
Yeah, so this is a very strange thing, that while there's an illusion that things are changing, there's always new technologies coming up, people finding new ideas. But what I have seen, that the mainstream loudspeaker development, driver development, is focusing on how to miniaturize the existing technology, how to make it more compatible with high power systems, how to make it more affordable, easier to commercialize, and in that,
How turn everything into a lifestyle product.
yes, and they are doing a stellar job in that aspect. We are seeing monumental changes. However, I would say that some things were not improved upon, and one of the thing is life expectancy of the driver. Because I'm looking at my drivers, they're about 50, 60 years old, and they look brand new. They've been never reconed. I'm using the original cones, and if I inspect them, someone who is used to modern drivers, you would think they were made less than a year ago. They look in such a pristine shape, and they were designed to be run 10, 15 hours a day, every day for decades. So they were built to have extremely heavy duty use, and to withstand time. And today, this is not a consideration for audiophile products, for audio drivers, yet it is still a consideration for pro drivers. And that's why a lot of people, they say, okay, I'm going for
Yeah,
pro
but
drivers.
even with pro drivers is not always the case. I own a pair of JBL 4425. This is the studio monitor series from the 80s from JBL. And so they really have professional drivers, but they also have foam surrounds that rot away after like 2 decades or 3 decades. So
Yes.
even in the professional
Uh,
world, you don't see that kind of long-lasting products anymore.
yes,
I mean,
that's a
look at the
sad
the
thing.
JBL,
And
the new, sorry, the new 43 series. These two-way 15-inch bass with a horn on top. I mean that is a speaker for like 20,000 bucks here in Germany, and it still has a foam surround.
mm.
Where you know, okay, I have to recone it or at least replace the surround in 20 years. And for that price range, that's a bit ridiculous.
Mm. So Yes, indeed. We did see this turn that even in the pro industry, the lifespan expectancy is not so much because the amplification technology and the demands and applications are changing so much that the manufacturers don't want to plan for more than 10 years of life expectancy for a product, even for a studio.
Yeah,
However, what I found that even if I want to use a modern day pro driver, and can I substitute my old Altex with it? And my sadly, my answer is still no, because
yeah,
today
you can't. You
we
can't. Yeah,
we not only went for lower life expectancy today, which technically should not affect sound quality by itself, but there are other considerations as well. So in the old days, they designed the drivers to be wide band drivers, and nowadays, the drivers are getting specialized to become narrow band drivers. So when you get a 15-inch Pro driver today, then it's designed to be crossed over under a kilohertz, and that's a very good case. They are designed to be crossed over under much lower than that. And if
yeah,
you let them even go up to a kilohertz, then you are going to hear so much nasties, cone breakups coming up from the crossover region that it's going to be a very, very bad experience. And even if you use DSP and hard limit everything above, let's say, 500 hertz, you
a
you
DSP
can
can't remove
you
distortion,
can't
so
remove the
that
distortion because
yeah,
from the electronic side you can limit some things, but the driver has its own movement, has its own resonant frequencies, and it's when the driver is designed to have a lot of resonant frequencies in the higher sound ranges, the acoustic feedback from the room is going to make the driver resonate and move at the kilohertz frequency, even though itself is not producing that frequency. So it's going to feed back to the amp. It's going to, but before that it's going to cause those modulations, excite those bad breakup modes in the driver, and we can't get rid of that. So that's why people are finding out that when we use pro drivers to mimic these ancient drivers, then we can have the SPL, we can have punch, we have power delivery, but that the joy of music is gone. We don't
yeah,
have the soul, we don't have that coherence, that fine layer of information that that's the essence of this sort of technology.
yeah. Yeah, it's really sad that we lost all the knowledge and skills to build these kind of speakers. And yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm a big fan of these TAD drivers, and they are fantastic. And also GBL is building great drivers, but it's not on the level that we used to, that we can see in these Altec drivers. They are still, yeah, they are still the gold standard, and yeah, really sad that
Mm.
nobody builds this stuff anymore.
And actually the Altex, these ones, the 515 series, they are just the peak of this technology range. When or this type of mentality or this type of sound, and some people are maybe sad that we cannot hear that. Although I would say that there are some companies today who are not well known, like Supravox, who are building technologies like that. But they are just as unknown to the public as Altec,
Exactly. Yeah.
and those speakers they are at a similar level where an Altec is, but the price range for them is just absolutely interstellar.
Yeah.
So they are even more inaccessible for the public than an Altec driver. So what I am on my channel I want to share with people is that you don't need to go to the extreme to enjoy the soul of music, this kind of experience in music that they offer. You can go, you can start with the speaker that you mentioned, the Le Petit,
Yeah,
that Monsieur Hiraga's loudspeaker with the Fostex FE103 driver, which is a tiny driver that already has the capacity to link us with the soul of the music.
yeah,
And what is in the Le Petit, the same thing is there in these big Artex speakers. Just we are expanding the frequency range, we are expanding the dynamic range, but that coherence is still there. And what people really know is what people really want is not the extremes. That's just the icing on the cake. What we really
yeah,
want is the cake. And the
yeah, yeah,
cake
yeah.
is basically le petit. And then when we add much more effort to it, much more time.
If you don't want to hear a submarine crashing into an iceberg, but if you want to listen to like a violin or like a cello or something, then a petit does everything you need.
Exactly, exactly. And it's something that everyone can build. So
Yeah,
even if you never did any DIYing yourself with minimal skills, even just buying minimal tools or just asking a friend to make a cabinet, giving him the design, anyone can build Le Petit, and enjoy this type of music listening. And then you are saying that, oh, but I'm sacrificing the ability to hear the submarine crash to the iceberg. But then I would say, well, then have a set of low efficiency speakers with subwoofers, and if you want to watch the Titanic sink, then use that system to watch the Titanic sink. And when you want to hear the violin, then plug in your speakers that you built, those tiny ones that cost 20 times less than those speakers that you are listening the submarine crash with, and you will have tears in your eyes.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. This is yeah. For me, it is it is really sad that the people who are specialized in selling this stuff. I mean, that is. I mean, a hi-fi dealer, that should be his profession. He should have these kind of stuff in his store. But yeah, yeah, there we at the beginning. I mean, you can walk through all the stores and you always see the same construction, like two-way soft dome tweeter with a plastic chassis in a miniaturized case. That is what everybody has for sale. But yeah, rarely anybody sells stuff that really connects to the music. That is my general problem
Yes,
with the whole industry.
that's what I have experienced as well. However, it's something that cannot be any other way, because once a dealer decides to sell these other type of systems, they will go out of business very very soon, within a year, because the customers, when they buy a system, they don't want to upgrade, they don't want to change, they don't come back for more products. They start spending their money to buy music, and they are listening to music instead of listening to sound reviews and auditioning systems, because they totally lose the interest in that. And
Yeah,
for
that's
example,
probably true. Yeah.
what my mentor did, how he solved this unsolvable conundrum, to how to provide a musical experience for people, and being able to provide it, so not close shop down in 1 year because of going out of business, is that he actually offered everyday products to people like Conrad Johnson, Vandersteen, Quicksilver, these brands that everyone is familiar with. Of course, he had only a very select, very few brands that he carried that had synergy with each other, and which he considered as having the uh, highest qualities that are in production today for the given price, the given value, and he carefully selected, matched systems together, matched with the cabling. When a new customer came to him, he always asked the person, "What music are you listening to? What do you have at home? What is your listening room?" And then they told about that, and then he put together a system for them, or he just picked the big room or the large room, which had different sounding, like different sonic universes to them, and he asked them, like, okay, just listen to this, and then with a discussion he figured out what the person really wants, and considering his current system, what he needs to change in his system to give him joy in the music, to be able to appreciate music and not just sound anymore. And when you are an audio dealer, I think probably this is the only way to live in an actual audio community with real people around us, because every audiophile already has his or her system. And what we want, no one wants to change all our systems and invest in something completely different from ground up, because that's a very big step. And audiophiles are very insecure by nature. No one wants to make that step. Okay, I'm starting to scratch. I am a very strange person, perhaps crazy in this way, that I decided, after having my experience of a life-changing experience of hearing two systems on one day, which were both the most expensive systems of that day, and one sounded the worst sound I ever heard in my life, and the other one sounded the best sound I ever heard in my life, and both were at the price of a Rolls Royce. And then I realized something's going on here. And I also realized that if I just start buying stuff and mixing things, I am never going to get to that magic sound land. I just decided I'm not going commercial route. I'm learning this, how to build everything for myself. And that's what I did. And I realized within 2 years, I have built a system that was just so immensely satisfactory, and I reached a level of immense satisfaction even before I got to know my mentor. And when I knew him, he just catapulted me on that journey much further away. But it was this inner desire to connect to music, to connect to musicality, and the realization that the regular approach of reading reviews and then buying it, trying out, I like it initially, but really doesn't work on the long term. I change it for something that was reviewed better to find out it works even less in my system. So I changed, but most people are not prepared to do that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have a feeling that this is the typical history of many audiophiles, that they are replacing uh, um, their gear over time, again and again and again and again, and there are basically two options. Either they follow your path and say, okay, I'm done with it. I'm building my own stuff, and I go different paths, or they give up at some point, because the gear is getting so expensive to for the next upgrade step that they can't afford it anymore, and then they give up with hi-fi completely. So that is my experience. Yeah, you start with like your typical British audiophile stuff, and you grade up next level. You end up with some big American stuff that you can barely afford, and then at some point you are still not satisfied, and either you understand that you have to take a completely different path, or you give up. That is, yeah, my experience.
Yes, my experience too. So all of my audio friends, they have gone through this route, and those ones who decided to go the DIY road, all of them have immensely satisfactory systems now, and enjoyed fantastic experiences during those 2 decades that we have worked together as audio buddies. And those who decided to stay just in the commercial path, they are still searching. They
Yeah,
still haven't found what they are looking for. And for our listeners, my message is: do not despair. To have a satisfactory system, you don't need to go like really all the way, like get really hardcore and become like me, like invest 20,000 hours of your life to learn and practice and master this skill. uh, it is enough that you keep your ears open, your mind open, and you make acquaintances with people who have experience in putting systems together.
yes,
Invite them to your listening room, have them listen to your system, and give you their recommendation. So for me, the most essential part of my audio journey was my audio friends. So even though we had a fantastic mentor, but what really catapulted us and made the big difference, because most of us was not like me, like dedicating basically my life to audio, but had other interest in as well, and they just wanted to enjoy music. So
yeah.
what we did is
And
that
it's not a question of big money.
no,
So
not at all,
you don't need big money.
not at
So
all. And within my audio circle, audio friends, we had people who could afford just the bare basics, and we had people who had the most expensive systems, who spent several times the amount of money on their system than they spend on their car. And all of us, we got together. We did not pass snarky remarks on judgments on other system because it's just too cheap or too expensive, because we had this wide dynamic range in prices and opportunities. We became open to experiencing everything, and we had such a good friendship that we always like traded and borrowed gear among us, and we tried out. So when we had someone invite had an audio party, we brought equipment with us. We brought like amplifier or the deck or a interconnect cable, everything, and then we just tried things out and
yeah,
experience like what happens when you put a very expensive transport into a very simple system, or you put a very expensive cable into a cheap system, or a cheap cable into an expensive system. And I know these are just cliches, but we went to an extremes about that, and that really helped all of us to find what we are looking for much faster, because we added our experience base together, and that was the only way that we could advance very fast, and only way to learn for those who don't want to build their systems, because
yeah.
the
It is not about blaming other systems. It is about sharing ideas and trying things out and benefit from each other's experience. That is the key. Yeah,
that's absolutely correct, because every audio system has strength and weaknesses, and us as human beings, for us, music and sound is an extremely subjective experience,
yeah,
and people are fooled by the fact that reviewers are trying to give objective analysis of a review of a product, but really, what matters, what impacts them, is the subjective level. And sometimes you read reviews where the reviewer writes that I'm just so bored doing those objective reviews, but today the system I had, this is sounds so magical. I just want to listen to this for the rest of my life, but sadly, tomorrow I have to get back to
Yeah.
reviewing products again, those boring things. And what people don't realize is that those magical combinations, usually they, when we have systems like that and when we have 20 audiophiles listening to it, then all of them will say, yeah, this is truly special, but maybe 10 of them or maybe even less will say that, yes, I'm looking for this exactly. Most of them will say, this is fantastic, but I want certain elements of it and have it in my system, because although this was a fantastic experience, but we listened to violins and it was wonderful, but I really want jazz and I really want to hear the sax and the trombone split the ceiling, and I need a different approach to do that, and we just need to share and get experiences. So for the trombone lover, the challenge is how to keep his system that can crack the window with the trombone, but inject the soul and musicality to that. And this we can figure out when we trade direct hands-on experiences.
Absolutely. Janos, we are talking way over an hour now, and I want to say thank you for joining my channel and share your views. And I would highly recommend his channel, Real World Audio. I have a link in the description below, and especially check out his thoughts about the voice of Lancelot. That is his speaker, which is a live cabinet, a whole different. Speaker construction idea. I would highly recommend to watch it. We haven't touched on it at all, and there are really many interesting thoughts you can hear from Janos on his channel. Janos, thank you very much for coming.
Torsten,
And
thank you so much for welcoming me on your channel. This was a fantastic dialogue. I enjoyed it tremendously. And if my channel's viewers are watching this video, I can really recommend the Snake Oil Audio channel for everyone. I have already recommended it, but I'm recommending it again because you are presenting uh, this view on audio, which matches and agrees with what I have experienced in audio. So when one wants to explore audio and became a mature audiophile, you need to hear several voices. And Torsten, I think your voice is authentic. You have the experience, and people can relate to you. And of course your channel is in German, so
yes, sadly, yeah.
but there's a way to get around that. You can put auto translate, you can put subtitles on the YouTube videos, and then put select auto translate. And then even though auto translate is not the best, but we are audiophiles, we know about technical terms, and when you see something mistranslated, you can put it together what what is being presented, and you present very valuable information. So thank you, it's been a pleasure being here, and thank you
Thank you,
for our
Janos.
listeners.
Maybe we can repeat such a discussion again on a special topic, or yeah, when you develop some products, we can talk about it as well. So hope to hear you again.
Thank you, definitively. I'm really up for that.
All right. So have a nice evening. Yeah. Don't be afraid. This was one video in English, but next one will be German again. And yeah, have a nice evening.